The math said he should be dead. By the end of the day, history said otherwise. January 26, 1945. Holtzwihr, France. A flat, frozen pocket of farmland pressed up against the Colmar Canal. No cover. No elevation. Just white ground and grey sky. The Americans were already in trouble. At 1,400 hours, German artillery began walking in from the east. The first shells landed short. The second bracketed the road. By the third, the line of advance stopped moving altogether. The men of Company B, 1st Battalion, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division dropped into shallow ditches and shell holes that barely deserved the name. The ground was frozen solid. Entrenching tools sparked off ice. They had crossed the canal earlier that morning under light resistance. Now the Germans had found them. A battery of 88mm guns opened fire from the tree line beyond Holtzwihr. The air snapped. Dirt and ice lifted and fell back down in pieces. A half-track at the edge of the road took a direct hit. Its engine block cracked. Flames rolled out of the open troop compartment. Inside that vehicle was an M10 tank destroyer, immobilized in seconds. The crew began climbing out. German infantry followed the shelling. They moved in small groups, using the folds of the land, advancing from the direction of WWII woods. Their weapons were light at first, .42s, rifles, submachine guns. Enough to pin the Americans in place. Company BS radios were already failing. Antennas snapped by shrapnel. Batteries frozen down to nothing. Orders had to be shouted from hole to hole. The company commander was hit early. Shrapnel to the leg. Evacuated backward toward the canal. Platoon leaders went down next. One by one, authority collapsed into whoever was still standing. By 14:30, the Americans were outnumbered and nearly surrounded. A lieutenant took command. I am 20 years old. Thin. Already wounded twice in this campaign. A fragment had torn through his hip days earlier. Another had scraped his heel. He had refused evacuation both times. Now he was lying in a shallow ditch beside the burning M10, watching German soldiers fan out across the snow. The Germans were close enough to see faces. The lieutenant stood up. He ordered his men to fall back to the canal. They didn't want to go. Someone had to cover the withdrawal. He told them again. Louder. With his voice steady. They began pulling back in pairs. Crawling. Running when they could. Dragging wounded. The lieutenant stayed where he was. The M10 was still burning. Its .50 caliber M2 machine gun was intact. Mounted on the rear deck. Exposed. No armor around it. No shield. He climbed onto the vehicle. German fire snapped immediately. Rounds cracked off the hull. Bullets cut into the frozen ground beneath his boots. He ignored them. He opened fire. The .50 caliber roared. The recoil shook the entire vehicle. Traces stitched across the field toward the advancing German line. Men went down. Others flattened themselves into the snow. The lieutenant swept the gun back and forth. Short bursts. Controlled. He had fired this weapon before. He knew how fast it burned ammunition. He knew the barrel would overheat. The Germans regrouped and kept coming. A Panzer IV rolled forward from behind the trees. Its turret turned slowly, methodically, searching for the source of fire. The lieutenant stayed on the gun. He called for artillery support on a field phone still connected to the battalion. His voice was calm. He gave distances, bearings, corrections. He adjusted fire while exposed from the waist up. German machine guns found him. Rounds tore through his jacket. One punched into his thigh. Another clipped his shoulder. He did not stop firing. The Panzer fired. The round passed over the M10 and detonated behind it. The blast lifted the lieutenant off his feet and slammed him back onto the deck. He got up again. The tank destroyer burned hotter. Flames licked at the ammunition boxes. Smoke poured around him, blinding, choking. He wrapped a scarf around his mouth and nose. The Germans were now less than 100 meters away. He fired until the last belt ran dry. When the gun clicked empty, he dropped off the M10 and moved forward on foot. The ditch line led toward a cluster of German field fortifications, low concrete bunkers half buried in snow and earth, interlocking fields of fire, each covering the next. There were at least 6 of them. The lieutenant checked his weapon. An M1 carbine. 1 magazine in place. 2 more in his pockets. He had a handful of grenades. His leg was bleeding freely. His vision narrowed at the edges. The withdrawal behind him was complete. Company B was across the canal. He was alone now. German voices carried from the bunkers. Orders. Shouting. The scrape of boots on concrete. He moved forward anyway. The first bunker was 20 yards ahead. He did the math without thinking. Distance. Ammunition. Time. The numbers did not work. He advanced regardless. The snow between the lieutenant and the first bunker was shallow but uneven, churned by shell craters and boot prints. Each step dragged. His wounded leg lagged half a beat behind the other. He ignored it. Pain came later, if at all. The bunker squatted low against the ground. Reinforced concrete. A narrow firing slit facing west, oriented toward the canal. The Germans inside believed the Americans were gone. They were wrong. At approximately 1,450 hours, the lieutenant reached grenade range. He pulled the pin with his teeth, waited a count, and threw. The grenade disappeared through the firing slit. The explosion was sharp and contained, a hollow concussion muffled by concrete. He did not pause. He rushed the entrance, firing the carbine from the hip. 2 German soldiers staggered out, blinded and bleeding. He fired again. They fell in the snow without a sound. Inside, the bunker was dark. Smoke. Dust. The smell of explosives and burned cloth. A machine gun lay overturned on its tripod. One man inside moved weakly, trying to reach a pistol. The lieutenant fired once more. He stepped back outside and leaned against the bunker wall. His breathing came in hard pulls. He checked his ammunition. 1 magazine nearly empty. The Germans reacted quickly. From the second bunker, farther up the line, a machine gun opened fire. Rounds cut across the snow, snapping into the side of the concrete structure inches from his head. Chips of stone flew into his face. He pushed off the wall and ran. The second bunker was larger. Its firing slit angled slightly north, overlapping with the first. This was deliberate. The Germans had built their defenses to kill anyone who tried to do exactly what he was doing now. He dropped into a shallow depression 10 yards short of the entrance. Bullets snapped overhead. One struck the ground near his hand, spraying ice into his sleeve. He waited for the firing rhythm. Milligram 42s fired fast, but not endlessly. He counted the bursts, felt the pauses. When the pause came, he threw his last grenade. It landed short, bounced once, rolled toward the entrance. The explosion tore the machine gun loose from its mount. He was on his feet before the sound faded. He fired into the doorway, emptied the rest of the magazine, and forced himself inside. The bunker interior was cramped. Bodies pressed against the walls. One German soldier was still alive, screaming, clutching his leg. The lieutenant stepped around him and moved on. Outside, German infantry began shifting positions. They had not expected a single man to attack the line. Now they realized what was happening. A mortar round fell behind him. Then another. The third landed closer. Dirt and snow rained down. He checked his watch. It was still daylight. He moved toward the third bunker. This one sat slightly higher, its concrete roof exposed above the snow. It commanded the field in front of it. The lieutenant approached from the blind side, keeping low, circling wide. His vision blurred. Blood soaked his trouser leg and froze stiff in the cold. He stumbled once and caught himself with his free hand. German voices rose from inside the bunker. Someone shouted a warning. He threw his last grenade. It detonated just inside the entrance. He fired through the smoke, counting shots, conserving rounds. When the carbine locked open, he slammed in a fresh magazine with numb fingers. Inside the bunker, the fighting was close. Too close for careful aim. He fired until movement stopped. 3 bunkers were silent. The Germans were no longer confused. From the 4th and 5th bunkers, coordinated fire erupted. Traces crossed in front of him, intersecting where he would have been had he advanced directly. The 6th bunker, farther back, fired sporadically, adjusting aim. They were bracketing him. He dropped flat behind the low rise of a shell crater and pressed himself into the frozen earth. Rounds snapped inches above his back. One punched through his jacket sleeve without breaking skin. He lay still. He could hear his own breathing. Too loud. Too fast. He waited until the firing slackened, then crawled sideways, inch by inch, dragging his wounded leg. His hands were slick with blood and numb from the cold. He felt nothing below the knee. A German soldier appeared suddenly at the edge of the crater, rifle raised. The lieutenant fired twice without aiming. The man fell backward out of sight. The fourth bunker was now less than 15 yards away. He rose and ran. This bunker had not been hit yet. Its machine gun was still operational. It fired as he approached. The first burst missed high. The second struck the ground at his feet. He reached the wall and pressed himself flat against the concrete. Inside, the Germans shouted in panic. Boots scraped. Someone tried to swing the machine gun toward the entrance. He leaned in and fired down the opening. The carbine bucked. The magazine ran dry again. He reloaded and went inside. The fighting took less than a minute. When he came back out, the snow around the bunker was dark and churned. His hands shook uncontrollably. He still forced them. 2 bunkers remained. The Germans began to withdraw. Men ran from the 5th bunker toward the tree line, trying to escape the collapsing position. Others fired wildly to cover them. The lieutenant fired at the runners until his magazine emptied. One fell. Another stumbled and disappeared into the smoke. He advanced on the 5th bunker without stopping. The mortar fire resumed, heavier now. One round landed close enough to lift him off his feet and slam him back down. He lay stunned, ears ringing, staring up at the grey sky. He pushed himself upright. He could no longer feel his left leg at all. The 5th bunker loomed ahead. He checked his ammunition. 1 magazine left. The 6th bunker still fired. The 5th bunker was damaged but not destroyed. Its firing slit was cracked, the concrete spalled by shrapnel, but the structure held. Inside, at least 2 Germans were still alive. He could hear them, short, urgent shouts, the metallic clatter of a weapon being repositioned. The lieutenant did not have grenades left. He slowed his pace, controlling his breathing, forcing his shaking hands to steady. His carbine was light now. 1 magazine. 15 rounds remaining. The machine gun from the 6th bunker fired again. Traces cut across his field of vision from right to left, walking closer with each burst. The gunner was adjusting. He angled toward the 5th bunker, keeping it between himself and the last position. The concrete absorbed several rounds meant for him. Chips flew. 1 fragment cut his cheek. He did not react. He reached the entrance and fired inside immediately, not waiting to assess. 3 shots. Pause. 2 more. A scream cut off abruptly. He stepped inside. The interior was smaller than the others. Low ceiling. Bare concrete walls. 1 German soldier lay slumped against the far wall, motionless. Another was crawling toward the rear, leaving a dark smear on the floor. The lieutenant fired once more. The 5th bunker went quiet. Outside, the German fire faltered. The field, moments ago alive with movement and sound, settled into an unnatural stillness broken only by distant artillery and the crackle of the burning M10 behind him. The 6th bunker remained. It sat farther back, partially obscured by smoke and drifting snow. It had a clear field of fire over the approach, and its crew now understood exactly what they were facing. A single American. The lieutenant stepped back out into the open. At approximately 1,530 hours, he began the final advance. The machine gun fired continuously now, long bursts intended to pin him down or cut him apart before he could close the distance. The rounds kicked up snow in a straight line toward him. He did not run straight at it. He moved in short rushes, angling, dropping, crawling, rising again. Each movement cost more than the last. His breath rasped. His vision tunneled. His wounded leg dragged uselessly, forcing him to pull himself forward with his arms when he crawled. A round struck his helmet, glancing off and spinning it sideways. He tore it off and left it behind. He closed to within 30 yards. The gunner adjusted again. The lieutenant fired back, single shots, aimed at the firing slit. He was not trying to kill. He was trying to force hesitation. It worked. The firing stuttered. He rushed the last distance. At the entrance, he fired until the carbine locked open. The magazine was empty. Inside the bunker, the Germans froze. One raised his hands. Another reached for a pistol. The lieutenant drew his sidearm. 2 shots echoed inside the concrete chamber. The 6th bunker fell silent. He stood there for several seconds, unmoving, as if waiting for something else to happen. His body trembled violently now. The adrenaline that had carried him forward began to drain away. He stepped back outside. The field in front of Holtzwihr was littered with bodies and abandoned equipment. 6 bunkers were neutralized. German infantry was retreating toward the woods. The immediate threat to the canal crossing was over. The lieutenant tried to walk. His leg gave out beneath him. He collapsed in the snow. He lay there, face down, unable to move. The cold pressed in immediately. Without motion, without adrenaline, it began to claim him. His hands stiffened. His breath slowed. Somewhere behind him, across the canal, American voices rose. Shouts. Confusion. Then urgency. Men from Company B began moving back across the frozen ground, cautiously at first, expecting fire that did not come. They found him where he had fallen. He was conscious, but barely. His uniform was torn and blackened. Blood had frozen into dark plates along his leg and side. His face was grey beneath the grime. They tried to lift him. He screamed once, short, involuntary, then clenched his jaw and said nothing more. He was carried back across the canal under intermittent shell fire. German artillery resumed as the Americans regrouped, but the bunker line remained silent. The German counterattack had failed. At the aid station, medics worked quickly. They cut away his clothes, counted wounds, treated shock, wrapped his leg and shoulder, gave him morphine. They expected him to slip away. He did not. When he was evacuated to the rear, word of what had happened began to spread. Not exaggerated, not embellished, just stated, plainly, by the men who had watched it happen. 1 officer, 1 disabled vehicle, 1 machine gun, 6 bunkers. The numbers were checked. The ground was walked. The bunkers were counted. The bodies were found. The math was recalculated. The lieutenant survived. He spent weeks in recovery, drifting in and out of consciousness, his body struggling to heal from wounds that should have ended him. Infection was a constant threat. So was exposure damage from the cold. He returned to duty later that spring. The war in Europe ended on May 7, 1945. Afterward, the Army reviewed actions across the front. Citations were written. Recommendations forwarded. Testimony taken. What had happened at Holtzwihr was confirmed. The lieutenant was Audie Murphy, at the time a 2nd lieutenant. For his actions on January 26, 1945, he was awarded the Medal of Honor. The citation was precise. It listed distances, numbers, decisions. It did not speculate about courage or character. It described what he did and when he did it. That was enough. Murphy was 20 years old. The fight at Holtzwihr did not decide the war. It did not alter the campaign in Alsace in any strategic sense. The Colmar pocket would be reduced over the following weeks through coordinated operations involving thousands of men. But for a few hours on a frozen field, the outcome hinged on a single point of resistance. A disabled vehicle that did not withdraw. A machine gun that did not fall silent when it should have. An officer who calculated his chances and advanced anyway.